Hey guys, tonight we're heading deep into the icy heart of the American frontier, to a time when just waking up could be a fight for your life. The wind screams outside your canvas tent, ripping across the open plains, making everything shiver, yes, even the snow. Your breath is a ghost before your face. The fire's out. Your boots? Frozen stiff. Good morning, pioneer. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it there? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge out of the tent, boots crunching through a crust of ice, and immediately regret everything. The cold hits like a slap, sharp, personal, and offended that you dared to exist. The sun's barely peeking over the horizon, a pale smear behind a curtain of grey clouds. You can't feel your nose. You can't feel your thoughts. What you can feel is hunger, a full bladder, and the unwelcome realization that the water bucket has frozen solid again. Your bed last night? A pile of scratchy wool and animal pelts laid over lumpy ground. You remember waking up at least 3 times, not because of dreams, but because your legs started to freeze and your breath kept fogging up the inside of the tent. Romantic, right? The plains around you stretch endlessly, a sea of white broken only by stunted trees, wagons half buried in drifts, and smoke tendrils from scattered cabins far in the distance. The only thing louder than the wind is your stomach. People always imagine the Wild West with heat and dust and tumbleweeds, but winter was the real beast. Entire communities would vanish under snowstorms. Some settlers, trapped and freezing, resorted to eating shoe leather or worse. A few didn't even make it to winter, they underestimated what cold really meant. And you? You're smack in the middle of it, eyes watering in the wind, trying to remember if you've ever been warm in your life. Your horse, bless its soul, is a furry statue behind the tent. You left its blanket on, but still, it stands motionless, icicles clinging to its mane. You pat its side, half for warmth, half for comfort. It doesn't respond. You both regret being born on this latitude. You manage to find your tin cup and scrape some ice from the tent wall into it. You'll melt it later, hopefully before frostbite claims another toe. Historians still argue whether winter or isolation was the true killer out here, but honestly, it might have just been poor decisions like this one. You check your supplies. Flour, dwindling. Bacon, nearly gone. Coffee, a rare treasure, guarded like gold. Matches, somewhere, hopefully dry. You mutter a few things your grandmother would not approve of and decide to deal with the fire later. First, you need to, find a tree. Nature calls, and it's never polite about it. So you stumble off a few yards, behind a bush that's pretending to be a tree, fumbling with stiff buttons and whispering apologies to whatever part of you is about to touch 19th century air. This is the least glamorous survival moment of your life, and that includes eating bark that one time. Back at camp, you begin the sacred ritual, waking up the fire. Flint, steel, numb fingers. The sparks don't care about your suffering. They dance, fizzle, and vanish. You keep trying. Eventually, a tiny curl of smoke rises from the kindling, and you guard it like a secret. It catches. It grows. You almost cry. The flame is pathetic, but it's yours. As the fire crackles, you slowly come back to life. You even smile, just a little, watching the ice melt inside your cup. It's going to taste like canvas and sadness, but it's hydration. Out here, that's basically a love language. You finally warm your hands over the fire. They tingle painfully, like 1,000 needles waking up. You sniff the air. Smoke, damp leather, and the faint scent of something dying. It's probably your last onion. The cold has taken on a personality now, sarcastic, relentless, and always watching. The morning moves slowly. You fix a rip in your glove using a bent needle and leftover thread from an old shirt. You stretch your legs, do a few awkward squats, maybe to stay warm or maybe because your joints sound like a haunted violin. Either way, it helps. By noon, the sky's brighter but the cold hasn't budged. You load a few items onto your sled, some firewood, a dead rabbit you trapped 2 days ago, and that single remaining potato. You plan to trade with a neighbor 3 miles away. 3 miles. In the snow. On foot. You begin the journey, sled creaking behind you. The landscape is still and blanketed, a page half written. You pass a dead tree with frost creeping along its branches like silver veins. You think you see something move in the distance, just a trick of the light, or maybe your neighbor returning from the same errand. Every crunch of your boots feels louder in the vast silence. Your breath comes in clouds. A bird caws once, then vanishes into the blank sky. There's beauty here, under all the struggle. A kind of brutal poetry. Like the land is testing you, but also telling you you're still here. You're still standing. And honestly, that's enough for now. You make it back just before dusk, cheeks stinging, ears burning, sled lighter than before but heart oddly heavier. The trade went well. You swapped your last rabbit, slightly freezer burned, for a small sack of flour, a pinch of salt, and, a miracle of miracles, a chunk of tallow. But the real prize? The old trapper threw in a buffalo robe that had too many holes for his taste. You nearly kissed him, holes and all. You sling the buffalo robe over your shoulder like a monarch returning from war. It smells like smoke, age, and some type of ancient musk that probably has its own family tree. You don't care. That thing is going to save your life tonight. You remember hearing about how the Plains tribes used buffalo hides for everything: robes, shelter, blankets, even baby slings. The robe you're carrying feels like history itself, stitched with stories and blood and cold winds survived. Inside the tent, you spread it out with reverence. It covers nearly the whole floor. Your old wool blankets get layered on top. Then, from the stash under your cot, you pull out your rabbit-skin gloves, tiny, stitched masterpieces that took you 3 weeks and more than a few puncture wounds to finish. You wore them once, cried from the warmth, and saved them for emergencies. Tonight qualifies. You slide your hands in. Soft. Insanely soft. Like your fingers are sinking into tiny warm clouds wearing fur coats. Rabbit fur's no joke. Trappers called it white gold, and not just because it sold well. It's one of the best natural insulators out there. Problem is, it gets wet fast and falls apart faster if not cured right. Still, in a dry cold like this, it's as close to heated gloves as you're gonna get. Next comes the layering ritual. You wrap an old coyote pelt around your shoulders. It's mangy, sure, but the tail still swings jauntily over your collar like some ridiculous fashion statement. You hum something half-remembered and start stitching a patch onto the robe. You're beginning to feel like a fabric Frankenstein, sewing together pieces of animal history to armor yourself against a season that wants you gone. Outside, the temperature drops like a bad joke. Inside, you add more wood to the fire. You hear the wind pick up and grin at your new fur fortress. It might not be much to look at, but you look fabulous. Feral. Fashion-forward frontier. Historians still argue whether buffalo hides were more valuable than horses in harsh winters. One thing's for sure, they were warm. Some travelers would line their wagons with them, curl inside like nesting dolls, or wear them like massive overcoats. Of course, moving in one was like wearing a weighted blanket soaked in history and bison sweat. You settle in with your gloves, your robe, and a mug of something that barely qualifies as stew, mainly hot water with bacon scraps and hope. You lean against the tent pole and close your eyes. Your mind drifts to the strange stories that make their rounds between frontier camps. There's the one about the man who stitched together 30 mouse pelts to make a vest. Some say it worked, others say it cursed his love life. Then there's the tale of a miner who swore that lining his boots with dried cow dung kept his toes warm all winter. You chuckle. Not everything out here is noble suffering, some of it's just weird. You check the seams of your gloves again. You remember learning the stitch from an old trading post woman who'd lost 3 fingers to frostbite and wasn't about to let it happen again. She used quills and sinew, worked faster with one hand than you could with 2. You always thought she looked like she'd seen 100 winters and had made each one beg for mercy. The light fades into a silvery dusk. The wind hisses along the edges of your tent, looking for a way in. You pull the buffalo robe tighter around you. Even through the cracks and missing patches, it holds heat like a secret. The tent rustles. Snow slithers off the roof. Your fire crackles in agreement. It's still cold. Of course it is. Your breath fogs the air, the ground is a slab of ice with dirt on top, and your toes are a coin toss. But tonight, you have furs, and that makes all the difference. You're wrapped in the work of your own hands, in the skins of animals that once walked this same frozen earth. There's something oddly sacred about that. You lie down slowly, pulling every layer over you. Rabbit fur, buffalo robe, coyote pelt, a wool scarf doubled as a hat. Somewhere under all of that is still you, alive, breathing, stubborn. Tomorrow, you'll need to check the traps. Repack the sled. Chop more wood. Maybe mend that hole in your sock that makes your foot whistle when the wind hits just right. But for now, you're warm. You're bundled. You're not dead. That's a pretty solid night on the frontier scoreboard. The fire burns low, glowing orange on the underside of the buffalo hide. It throws long shadows across the fabric walls of your tent. The world is quiet except for the wind, and even that sounds slightly more polite when you're this cozy. You drift off not to dreams, but to survival itself. The furs hold your warmth. The gloves cradle your fingers. The cold waits outside, disappointed, knowing it lost this round. And you, covered in history, sleep like a mammal who earned it. Morning doesn't so much arrive as creep in uninvited. Your eyelids crack open to a light that's more grey than gold, and it takes a full minute to remember where you are. Then the draft hits you. Right down the back of your neck. Ah, yes. The glamorous life of a winter settler. You stretch under your patchwork of pelts, bones creaking louder than the tent poles. You survived another night. That counts for something. But now comes the real question. Do you leave the warm cocoon of fur and face the biting wind, or do you wait until your bladder makes the choice for you? It chooses. You groan. Stepping outside feels like betrayal. Your body protests the temperature change like a cat shoved into a bathtub. Even the horse gives you a side eye as you stomp through the frozen crust. You both know what's next: fire, food, then chores. But not everyone out here has a tent. You hike a half-mile west to check on a neighboring family, the Dobbins, who decided to try wintering in a sod house. You'd offered them some canvas weeks ago, but old Mr. Dobbins had waved you off, muttering something about trusting the earth to keep us. Well, the earth has opinions. Their home looks like a giant molehill trying to cosplay as a cottage. Sod walls, barely 3 feet high, peek above the snowdrifts, and a crooked stovepipe spits smoke like a dying dragon. You knock on the low wooden doorframe and duck inside. Instant warmth. The Dobbins family sits huddled near a cast-iron stove, steam rising from a bubbling pot. The walls are literally made of dirt, grass roots still dangling from parts of the ceiling, but it's cozy in a weird, cave-like way. You brush snow off your coat and take a seat on a bench made of stacked crates. They've done it right. Insulation from packed earth, double-thick rugs on the floor, even a second ceiling made from muslin and pine boards to keep warm air from escaping. A tiny window is frosted over but lets in just enough light to make the place feel less like a tomb. Historians still argue whether sod homes or log cabins were better suited for winter. Sod offered insulation and camouflage, but it also meant battling leaks, burrowing pests, and the distinct possibility that your roof could sprout weeds in spring. Still, you can't argue with the warmth. One of the Dobbins kids offers you a tin mug of something hot, maybe coffee, maybe boiled bark. You sip it gratefully either way. Back at your own camp, your fire's out. Again. You spend the next hour rebuilding it and cursing pine cones under your breath. Then it's on to checking the inside of your own shelter, an early-stage cabin project you started months ago. It's not much yet, for log walls, uneven as a drunk mule's gait, and a roof that still argues with snow. But it stands. Inside, you've started laying down planks for a floor. The hearth is just a stone ring for now, but one day it'll be a proper fireplace. With a mantel. Maybe even a rocking chair. A dream as warm as soup on a cold day. You test the walls, press your palm against the wood. It's cold as the grave. You add more moss chinking between the gaps, stuffing it like a turkey with insulation. It's the poor man's cork, but it does the job. There's an art to surviving in unfinished homes. You section off one corner with a blanket, build the fire close, and sleep with your head practically in the embers. You learn to angle the roof so wind slides over it instead of punching it like a drunk at a saloon. You use every crack and nail like a chess move in your game against the cold. You remember a story passed around camp about a man who lined the walls of his cabin with newspapers. Kept the drafts out and gave him something to read. Genius. Another settler swore by cow dung plaster. Less elegant, more fragrant. But it worked. As you work, a thought itches in the back of your head. You're not the only one doing this. Thousands before you carved warmth out of wood, dirt, and sheer spite. And they made it. Mostly. You step outside, take a look around. The landscape stretches white and still. Chimneys trail smoke in the distance. Somewhere a dog barks once, then falls silent. The cold isn't just weather, it's a personality. Demanding. Temperamental. Easily offended. But also honest. You return to the tent for one last chore, banking the fire for the evening. You pile ash around the embers, add a few thicker logs, and hope it smolders until morning. Then you lay out your bed again, this time layering the buffalo robe first, followed by an old quilt that smells like must and survival. You glance at the corner where a pile of cedar planks waits to become furniture someday. A stool, maybe. Or a shelf. It makes you smile. Cold has a way of stripping things down, but not out. You still dream. You still plan. Even if your plans include asking, how can I make this stick look more like a chair? You crawl into your bedding, pull the rabbit gloves off and tuck them inside your shirt to keep them warm. The tent snaps in the wind, but you barely notice. You're thinking of sod homes, of fires built in stone circles, of cabins still growing one log at a time. You're thinking of tomorrow's wood pile, tomorrow's stew, tomorrow's chill, and how, somehow, you'll outstubborn them all. The cold has rules, and fire is the first one. You wake up with a nose like a popsicle and the delightful realization that the fire didn't make it through the night. Again. Your breath curls in the air above you, hanging like a silent question. How many times can a person relight the same fire before losing their mind? You sit up, wrap your buffalo robe tighter, and peer at the hearth. Just ash and regret. No glow. No smoke. Not even a whisper of warmth. This is fine. You're fine. Your fingers, on the other hand, are 2 shades away from snapping off like icicles. No matches left. Of course not. That would have been too easy. The last one gave up during yesterday's windstorm and crumbled in your glove like a candy stick. So today, you go old school, flint and steel. The method everyone loves to talk about and no one loves to use. The flint's cold in your hand. The steel even colder. You crouch low, knees cracking like old wood, and strike. Sparks fly, elegant and useless. You adjust the angle. Again. This time, a spark kisses the kindling, a little tuft of dry moss you tucked away 2 weeks ago like it was treasure. It catches. You hold your breath. You coo at it like it's a baby bird. You feed it a sliver of bark, then a whisper of dried grass. It grows. A flicker becomes a flame, and suddenly, you're Prometheus in rabbit gloves. You warm your hands and laugh out loud, just once, because honestly, that spark feels like winning the lottery. Historians still argue whether the average pioneer knew how to make fire without matches. Some say it was common knowledge, others say most folks would have frozen solid without trade posts selling sulfur-tipped convenience. What's clear? You learn fast when your survival depends on it. Fire-making out here is part science, part sorcery. You need 3 things: ignition, the spark, tinder, dry and fragile, and kindling, small sticks, ideally not damp from last night's blizzard. If any of those fail, you're back to square one, rubbing sticks and whispering profanities to the wind. There's an old trick you picked up from a mountain man with more beard than face. He'd tuck bits of dry moss and birch bark inside his shirt to keep them warm and dry all day. Gross? Yes. Effective? Absolutely. You've adopted the practice, though your moss stash sometimes confuses visitors. Is that your emergency fire kit or your lunch salad? Another classic hack: char cloth. Take a bit of cotton, scorch it in a sealed tin near the fire until it turns black, but not to ash. That stuff? It'll catch a spark like magic. Problem is, you used your last piece 3 days ago to light a pipe you didn't even finish. Choices were made. Some of the old-timers swear by burning dried dung, buffalo, horse, cow, whatever's nearby. It doesn't smell great, but out here, the nose adapts. You've seen entire cookfires fueled by patties the size of pancakes. Bonus, no trees needed. Downside, kind of ruins pancakes forever. Once the fire's going, your whole world changes. You thaw out enough to move your fingers without weeping. You melt snow in your tin cup for drinking water. You warm up yesterday's stew, still recognizable, if slightly more gelatinous than you'd like. You take a moment to sit beside the fire and watch it dance. It's hypnotic, really, how something so simple, so primal, becomes your best friend out here. A flicker of flame means heat, light, safety. Without it, the dark creeps in. The cold wins. You remember one brutal night from your first winter: no fire, no matches, wind like a freight train. You ended up burning half your wagon to survive, including the back wheel. You still walk funny when it's cold. There's debate among homesteaders about the best fire setup: teepee fires, long log fires, Dakota holes. You've tried most of them. The Dakota fire hole, where flames burn in a sunken pit with a vent for air. Genius. Less smoke, more heat, easier to hide from the wind. Also, perfect for cooking if you can keep snow from caving in the roof. Today, though, you've built a good old log cabin fire, a stack of split logs shaped like a tiny Lincoln Logs palace. It's sturdy, it's warm, and it makes your shelter smell like burnt pine and effort. You glance around. The snow outside hasn't let up. Your tent flaps a little harder. You toss another log on the flames and check your tinder pouch. Still enough for 2 or 3 more tries. You tuck it carefully into a tin and slip it under your shirt, next to your rib cage. Fire insurance, frontier style. As night settles in again, the fire becomes more than heat. It's a spotlight in the dark. It draws in the silence like a magnet. You sit close, eyes half-lidded, watching embers curl upward like dreams you forgot to chase. The flame crackles. Your belly's full. Your breath no longer fogs with every word. You made fire, from spark to blaze. And in the wild cold west, that's about as heroic as it gets. You wake up in the middle of the night with a strange tingling in your toes. That's rarely a good sign. You try to wiggle them. The left foot obliges, barely, but the right? Nothing. Just a heavy, silent ache, like it's been replaced with a frozen brick. You sit up, fumble with your bootlaces, and yank the thing off as fast as numb fingers will allow. The sock underneath is damp. Never good. The toes are pale. Worse. You press on them, no bounce, no color, just a cold that feels deep. Deep like it's sunk in and decided to stay. Congratulations. You might just be courting frostbite. You move fast now, rolling the foot between your hands, massaging gently, the way you learned from that traveling doctor who traded a frostbite lecture for stew and a bottle of whiskey. Don't rub snow on it, he'd said. That's a myth. You'll do more harm than good. Warm it slow, not fast, or you'll crack it like glass. Crack it like glass. You remember that phrase every time the temperature drops below polite levels. You shuffle closer to the fire, stoke it up with trembling hands, and ease your foot toward the warmth. Not close, never too close. Heat can burn tissue that's already flirting with death. You hover it there, wincing as pins and needles return, first like whispers, then like a parade of tiny, angry bees. Frontier life doesn't come with hospitals. It comes with knowledge passed down from weather-beaten neighbors, from grandmothers who treated infection with onion poultices, and from folklore that may or may not have roots in reality. Historians still argue whether frontier folk medicine did more harm than good, but when the doctors are a week away by sled, you take what you can get. You reach for the salve you made weeks ago, a gritty blend of bear fat, beeswax, and pine resin. Smells like a pinecone's armpit, but it helps seal skin, lock in heat, and keep out frost. You rub a little onto your toes, trying not to scream when sensation floods back like a stampede. Back in the day, some folks used to treat frostbite with whiskey and prayer. Others wrapped limbs in hot animal organs, still warm from a recent kill, unhygienic. Definitely. But effective in desperate situations. One story you heard involved a woman who strapped a freshly butchered pig liver to her husband's frozen hands. He kept the hands. The pig, not so much. Then there were poultices. Everything was a poultice. Crushed garlic, tobacco spit, honey mixed with lard, if it could be smeared, it was medicine. You've tried a few of those remedies yourself. The garlic burned. The tobacco gave you a rash. The lard? Honestly, not bad. You recall the time you burned your hand grabbing a red-hot skillet, and your neighbor wrapped it in mashed potatoes. You thought she was insane. But it cooled the skin, kept it moist, and hey, you didn't scar. There's something oddly comforting about the messiness of frontier medicine. No sterile gloves, no sleek syringes, just instinct, improvisation, and a lot of animal fat. You didn't need a degree. You needed guts, grit, and maybe a pinch of mint if you could afford the luxury. Tonight, though, you're playing it safe. Just warmth, massage, and elevation. You prop your foot up on a folded blanket and pull your pelts close. The fire pops, casting flickering shadows against the tent wall. Your toes still ache, but they ache like they're part of you again. That's progress. Outside, the wind howls. You can hear the rafters of your half-built cabin groaning in the distance. You think of those poor souls who froze in their wagons, not because they gave up, but because they just didn't know what to do when warmth ran out. But you? You're learning. Slowly, painfully, with frost-bitten toes and a journal full of experimental salves. You've got enough knowledge now to treat a minor injury, soothe a burn, dress a wound, even pull a broken tooth, though you're hoping to keep that particular skill theoretical. You reach for your journal and scribble a note, check boots for damp spots before bed. Don't trust a warm enough. Dry socks equal survival. The words blur a little from your breath fogging the page. You smile anyway. It's a quiet victory. A night where you felt yourself slipping toward danger and clawed your way back. Your body, as sore and frost-nipped as it is still here. Still fighting. Still yours. You tuck yourself back under the buffalo hide, your newly bandaged foot wrapped in a fresh pair of wool socks you've been saving for a moment just like this. You wiggle your toes again. This time, both respond. Weakly, but definitely. Somewhere in the dark, the wind shrieks like a banshee denied her prize. You whisper back, "Not tonight." Your stomach growls loud enough to startle a bird from the snow-draped pine outside your tent. If the cold doesn't get you, hunger just might, though ideally, it won't come to that. You eye your supply stash, a tin of lard, a strip of salted pork clinging to life, half a sack of flour, and some beans that have been rehydrated so many times they've developed a personality. Breakfast is about to be a desperate masterpiece. You toss a handful of beans into a pot with a cup of melted snow, then slice off a precious sliver of that pork like it's ancient treasure. It sizzles in the skillet, thin as a prayer but fragrant enough to make your mouth water. The fat coats the pan like liquid gold, because, out here, it might as well be. Calories are currency. They aren't just fuel, they're insulation. Out here, you don't count carbs, you worship them. You toss in a chunk of flour to thicken the mess, stir, and let the whole thing bubble like a swamp. It smells amazing. It tastes like survival. You chew slowly, letting the warmth radiate through your chest like a sunbeam. It's greasy, salty, a little crunchy from that one mysterious bit, but you don't ask questions. Out here, you bless the weird crunch. There's a reason frontier folks loaded up on fat. Bacon, suet, lard, they were life. Forget kale. Forget detox smoothies. You eat like a bear prepping for hibernation because you are a bear prepping for hibernation. And unlike your modern self, this version of you might not get another full meal until next week. Historians still argue whether frontier diets led to premature aging or built tougher bodies. The truth is probably both. People were lean, weather-beaten, and always slightly hungry. But when the stew was hot and the fat plentiful, they also lived moments of absolute bliss. You glance at your tin of lard and sigh. It's almost gone. You could try rendering more from game, but that means trapping, skinning, melting, and let's not forget the lovely scent of boiling fat, which lingers in your hair longer than heartbreak. Still, food isn't just survival. It's strategy. You remember the old rancher who used to down raw eggs mixed with molasses every morning, claimed it made him invincible. You tried it once. It made you invincible to friendship. But the calories kept you warm, and that was the goal. There's an art to staying warm from the inside out. Coffee helps, even if it's weak and brewed with beans that taste like regret. A splash of whiskey in the cup? Frontier miracle. Not recommended for hydration, but excellent for morale. One of your neighbors, Martha, the queen of cabin cuisine, makes a stew from bone marrow, wild onion, and something she calls snow cabbage. You don't ask what it is. It smells like socks but tastes like heaven. She serves it in chip bowls with a side of sass and survival tips. You've taken notes. There was also the infamous mystery meat loaf passed around the camp last year. Nobody knew what it was. Everyone swore it tasted like something different. Some said squirrel. Others were betting on porcupine. One person claimed it was shoe leather with gravy. It fed 12 people and gave 8 of them wild dreams about dancing elk. Nobody died, so it counts as a win. Food builds community too. You remember sitting around someone else's fire, swapping jerky for pickled eggs, sharing stories that got taller with every spoonful. Out here, sharing food is like sharing warmth. It says you're not alone. Even if it's just for the length of a biscuit. Tonight's dinner? That'll be a rabbit stew, if the snare line paid off. If not, it's going to be a return to the bin symphony. Again. You add a handful of pine needles for flavor. Sounds weird? It's loaded with vitamin C, tastes like licking a tree, but at least it keeps the scurvy away. You miss fruit. You do questionable things for an apple. Or an orange. Something round and juicy and not scraped out of a tin. Even a raisin would feel exotic at this point. But you adapt. You make bread from acorn flour. You boil bark into tea. You trick yourself into thinking dried jerky is a delicacy. And when the hunger pangs get loud, you hum a little tune to distract yourself, usually something cheerful, ironic, and totally inappropriate for the situation. Today? Home on the range, obviously. You clean your pot with snow and stack your dishes with grim pride. Another day, another meal that didn't kill you. Not yet, anyway. As night falls, you bank the fire and pull out your secret stash, one square of maple sugar wrapped in oilcloth. You break off a crumb. Just a sliver. Sweet, earthy, warm. You let it melt on your tongue, eyes closed, tasting a memory of better seasons. Spring will come. It has to. Your stomach's not full, but it's not empty. And for now, that's enough. You're fed. You're warm. You're ready for whatever tomorrow throws your way. Preferably not another plate of beans. You wake with your blanket askew, a sliver of ankle exposed to the night air, and it feels like someone hit you with a frozen hammer. Your body recoils instantly. You yank the buffalo robe over your feet and curl into yourself like a cinnamon roll of regret. This is how it always starts. One exposed inch. One gap in your armor. That's all the cold needs to stage a full-blown siege. You sit up and begin the sacred ceremony of winter dressing, better known as the layering game. It's less about fashion, more about not dying. Think onion cosplay, but sadder. First comes the underlayer, wool long johns that scratch like they're mad at you. Then socks, 2 pairs, if you're lucky, one inside the other like a cozy Russian nesting doll. You pull on your wool shirt, button by reluctant button. Then the trousers, stiff from last night's chill, they creak like old floorboards when you move. Over that, a second shirt. Flannel, maybe. Maybe cotton. You're not even sure anymore. You just know it smells vaguely of campfire and boiled beans. Next comes the overshirt. Then the vest. Then the jacket. And finally, the coat. A bulky, mismatched, patched-together beast that once might have been canvas but is now mostly duct tape's great-grandfather, rawhide stitching and a lot of attitude. You top it off with a scarf, a knit cap, and, of course, your rabbit gloves, still the MVP of your winter wardrobe. You wiggle your fingers inside them like they're royalty sliding into a throne. You step outside and immediately feel a gust slice across your face. Not through it, across it, like it's trying to take your cheekbones with it. You wrap your scarf up higher, only your eyes showing now. And even they are starting to consider hibernation. Your breath fogs the air. It's like walking inside a freezer that talks back. Historians still argue whether multiple thin layers or fewer thick ones were better for frontier winters. Some folks swore by layered wool, trapping heat in microclimates. Others wrapped themselves in a single, thick buffalo robe and called it good. Your team both. You'll wear layers and a hide and a blanket cloak if it means your toes stay pink. The real trick is to avoid sweating. That's the part no one tells you. Once you get damp, you're done. Sweat plus sub-zero equals an ice suit made of your own bad decisions. So you move slow, breathe steady, and peel off layers if you work hard, then layer back up before the chill notices. You remember hearing about the fur trappers who'd line their boots with straw, newspaper, even dried moss. One man you met swore by shredded bark. Said it wicked moisture better than wool. You tried it once. It worked, but you made odd squeaky noises with every step, and your dog refused to walk next to you. Some folks used to wrap their feet in old flour sacks. Others stitched boot liners from squirrel pelts, rabbit hides, or even raccoon tails. You once saw a man wearing raccoon on his head and feet. Either a fashion icon or completely unhinged, possibly both. Your boots today? 2 pairs of socks, plus hide liners you made last fall. The left boot's holding up. The right has a tiny leak. You'll patch it later with deer sinew if you're feeling ambitious. Or string from an old shirt if you're not. You hike toward the tree line to fetch more firewood, your layers creaking and swishing like you're smuggling an entire wardrobe under your coat. Every movement takes effort. Bending over feels like a full-body negotiation. But you're warm. That's the magic. You've layered so well that even the wind seems mildly annoyed at your preparedness. It pokes around your collar, sniffs at your wrists, but finds no weakness. You smirk into your scarf. Not today, old man winter. The sun peeks out, barely. A soft golden haze on a snow-covered world. It's almost beautiful if you ignore the fact that your eyelashes are freezing together. You haul back a bundle of firewood and strip off one layer before going inside, just enough not to melt yourself. You stow your coat on the peg, okay, a bent nail, hang your scarf near the fire, and peel off your gloves like a knight unarming after battle. There's comfort in the ritual. In the shedding of layers as you warm up. It reminds you of seasons. Of the promise that someday this winter will end, and you won't need to dress like a wool-wrapped burrito just to fetch water. You sip some pine needle tea and glance at your growing pile of layers near the hearth. Each one is a story. That vest? From your first trade. The overshirt? Sewn from your grandfather's blanket. The gloves? Hours of finger-pricking effort and creative swearing. Clothing isn't just protection. It's memory. It's resilience. You're wrapped in evidence that you've made it this far, and, with luck and layers, you'll make it a little further. You pull the robe around your shoulders and let yourself rest. You're warm, well-wrapped, and full of just enough calories to face another round tomorrow. And tonight? Maybe, just maybe, you'll sleep through without waking up to frozen ankles. You never forget your first night in a covered wagon during a western winter. It's not just the cold, it's the sound. The canvas flaps like a flag in battle, every gust of wind trying to pull it free and carry it to Kansas. And inside? Inside it's less cozy prairie life and more refrigerated coffin with wheels. You lie under 3 layers of damp wool, your breath curling up into the low roof, where it promptly freezes and then drips back down onto your forehead like a cruel little insult. Water from your own lungs. Fantastic! The wood frame creaks with every breeze, and the oxen outside shift, their bells clinking faintly like wind chimes built by someone with a dark sense of humor. You try to roll over, but your elbow knocks into your sibling, who's also bundled under the same fur blanket, and is either asleep or just too frozen to complain. You miss the tent. You miss the earth under your back. In the wagon, every board squeals, every draft is amplified, and every snowflake that lands above you sounds like it's been thrown by an angry sky god. And yet, people lived like this. For months. On purpose. Historians still argue whether the canvas-covered wagon was more symbol or survival tool. Truth is, it was both. In warm months, it was shelter, storage, and transport. In winter, it was a gamble. You could reinforce it, line the inside with quilts or buffalo hides, stuff the cracks with old newspapers or strips of cloth, but at the end of the day, it was still wooden canvas, and snow didn't care. You sit up slowly and bang your head against the roof. Classic. The whole space is cramped, only a few feet wide and barely tall enough to sit in. You pull on your boots, still wet, and reach for the biscuit tin tucked under the seat. Frozen solid. Of course. You crawl to the flap and peek outside. The prairie is a sheet of moonlit ice, the grass long buried, the sky a silver blanket of clouds. The oxen puff steam like old trains. You've tethered them close to the wagon to share warmth, though, honestly, you think they're warming you more than the other way around. One trick you've learned from seasoned wagon folk: dig a shallow trench under the wagon and build a small fire there, shielded by rocks. The heat rises into the wagon floor, giving you just enough warmth to not wake up encased in ice. It's risky, one spark too many and your entire life on wheels becomes a bonfire, but with proper care, it works. Another old tip? Hot stones. Heat them in the fire, wrap them in cloth, and tuck them into your bedding. It's like frontier magic. Until, of course, you forget to check one and it burns a hole through your only pair of socks. Lessons. The wagon storage makes things both easier and harder. Everything's in arm's reach, but also in your reach, your partner's reach, and the dog's reach, which means someone's always knocking over the flour barrel or sitting on the tin of coffee. There's no privacy. Know your side. Just knees, elbows, and negotiation. You remember hearing stories of families with 6, even 8 people packed into a single wagon. How did they sleep? The answer is, in shifts, diagonally, or sitting up. Sometimes on each other. Kids got the warm spots, adults made do with awkward angles and dreams of feather beds. You shift to the back of the wagon and unlatch the storage chest. Inside, everything is damp and smells faintly of onions and wet wool. But there, wrapped in oilskin, is your prize, a small square of jerky and a dwindling stick of cinnamon. You nibble the jerky first, tough as a leather strap, but it gives your jaw something to do. The cinnamon? You just sniff it. For morale. Covered wagons were mobile homes, sure, but they were also rolling iceboxes in winter. A canvas sheet, even doubled up, doesn't stand a chance against sleet and snow. You've tried stuffing straw between the ribs, sewing extra layers onto the roof, even hanging quilts from the sides. It helps, a little. One neighbor tried lining their entire wagon interior with sheepskin. It looked like a woolly cocoon. Another installed a tiny iron stove inside, ingenious, until the chimney collapsed mid-blizzard and nearly smoked them all out. The real salvation is in body heat. You curl up with the others, siblings, dog, partner, whoever's close, and form a human fur pile. You fall asleep to the sound of wind, snoring, and the rhythmic clank of the oxen's chains. It's like a lullaby written by winter itself. And still, some nights, the beauty sneaks in. You remember one evening when the sky cleared and stars burst out like diamonds across black velvet. You lay back on a pile of hay, head poking out of the wagon flap, and just stared, breath fogging upward into the vastness. It didn't feel cold then. Just quiet. Holy, almost. Back in the present, you check the oil lantern. Low, but enough. You set it beside your bedding and hunker down, curling into the furs with your hands between your knees. You wrap your scarf up to your nose and let your eyelids flutter closed. You'll wake stiff. You'll wake cold. But you'll wake. And when morning comes, you'll stoke a fire, melt snow for coffee, and count fingers and toes like inventory. If they're all still there, you'll call it a win. Because life in a covered wagon during winter isn't about thriving. It's about enduring, with a little help from oxen, hot stones, and the strategic use of cinnamon. You've got traps to check. Not a romantic thought, maybe, but if you want protein that doesn't come from another round of bean surprise, you've got to earn it. That means snowshoes on, gloves tight, and a long trudge into the woods, through snow deep enough to qualify as a personality trait. Your breath curls around you like a scarf, crystallizing in the still air. It's early, but not early enough to beat the cold. That beat you the moment you opened your eyes. The snowshoes creak with each step. Makeshift but sturdy, rawhide straps over a willow frame you built after 3 failed prototypes and 1 unfortunate face-first snow dive. Now, they spread your weight wide enough to keep you from sinking. Mostly. You still fall in sometimes, just not as dramatically. Trapping in the Wild West isn't glamorous. It's not like those paintings with noble trappers standing heroically next to rivers. It's cold, quiet, slow, and full of unpleasant surprises. Sometimes you hike out 2 miles just to find your snare empty, or worse, tripped with no catch. But today? Today's different. You reach the first trap. A simple figure 4 deadfall you set near a tree line where tracks crisscrossed days ago. The snow's been disturbed. You crouch, careful not to breathe too heavily, lest your breath fog your vision, and find what you hoped for, a snowshoe hare, frozen stiff, caught cleanly. It's not a feast, but it's meat. And meat means heat. You lift the hare, tuck it into the sack on your back, and reset the trap. Further along, a second snare waits, strung between 2 bent saplings. This one's empty, but the area's peppered with tracks, fox, maybe. Or something bigger. You make a mental note to be louder on your way back. You don't mind animals watching you. You do mind them considering you as dinner. Historians still argue whether trapping was sustainable in the long term or whether it devastated local populations. All you know is, for the individual trying not to starve in a place where plants hide for 6 months, it's the difference between survival and suffering. You move on to your third set. A steel trap you bartered off an old trapper last summer who claimed it once caught a bobcat the size of a sled. You think he was lying. Still, it's solid, and today it's clamped tight around the leg of a raccoon. You approach slowly. The animal is long dead, thankfully. You whisper a soft thanks, because you know it's not a fair game. You're the one setting traps, using tools and brains and bait. The least you can do is honor the trade. You tuck it beside the hair and begin the hike back, legs already sore, cheeks raw from the wind. You feel the strain deep in your thighs. Snowshoes demand muscles you didn't know existed. And yet, there's something beautiful out here. The stillness. The patterns of animal tracks looping between trees. The way the snow muffles the world, so even your thoughts sound quieter. A kind of frozen cathedral. You remember tales shared around the fire about legendary mountain men who could read a squirrel story from a single paw print. Some of those stories are probably nonsense, like the guy who claimed he tamed a bear using only jerky and kindness, but some? You believe. You once met a woman who could identify animals by scent alone. She'd wrinkle her nose, tilt her head, and say things like, "2 foxes passed here yesterday. One was limping. The other was in love." You weren't sure if she was brilliant or just lonely. Maybe both. There are old tricks you've learned, passed down from trappers who spent more winters out here than you've had hot meals. Things like, place traps where the snow compresses differently, that means a trail. Or, bait with what's left over from your own meals. Grease. Bones. Even coffee grounds sometimes do the trick. You've also learned what not to do: never leave blood near your shelter. Never skin anything inside your tent. And never, ever, forget where you set your traps, especially the steel ones. Your left boot has a story it doesn't want to tell again. By the time you reach your camp, the sun's higher. Not warmer, just more judgmental. The wind's picked up. Your cheeks are wind-burned, your gloves damp, and your fingers beginning to ache. But your sack's heavier now. You got the hair first, clean, quick, practiced. The raccoon takes longer. Its pelt's in decent shape. You stretch it on a board to dry, already thinking of the mittens you'll sew once it's tanned. They won't win beauty contests, but they'll keep your hands attached. You set the meat simmering in your stew pot with wild onion and a pinch of salt. Not a feast, but it smells like one. You inhale deeply, stomach growling in agreement. Trapping isn't fun. It's not easy, but it works. You eat. You stay warm. You stay alive. And out here? That's everything. As the stew bubbles, you sip your pine tea, lean back against the log wall of your half-built cabin, and watch the snow fall in lazy spirals. You're tired. You're sore. But you've got food in your pot, a drying pelt to your name, and all 10 fingers still operational. That's a pretty good day in the wild winter west. The wind's calmed, the sky is an unconvincing shade of blue, and you've got one goal today: get to the trading post and back before nightfall, or before your eyebrows freeze off. Whichever comes first. You wrap your scarf tighter, double-check the sled harness, and glance down at your haul: a bundle of pelts, a few dried roots, the raccoon you trapped yesterday, now respectfully skinned and rolled, and, of course, the desperate hope that someone's got coffee for sale. The trading post isn't far, just about 5 miles if you cut through the ridge and cross the frozen creek. But that's 5 miles of crusty snow, hidden ice patches, and the occasional rabbit hole just waiting to eat your ankle. The sled creaks behind you, your boots crunch ahead, and your breath fogs the air in ghostly puffs. The silence of the cold is oddly loud. You hear everything: your footsteps, the creak of tree branches, even your own heartbeat when you stop to catch your breath. You hum a little tune to keep yourself company. Something bouncy. Ridiculous. Yankee Doodles work surprisingly well when your nose hairs are freezing. After an hour, you reach the ridge. It's steep, slick, and lovingly decorated with wind-polished ice. You mutter a few frontier-friendly curses and haul the sled by rope, one careful step at a time, grunting with every slip. You make it to the top, panting, and look out. There it is. Like a mirage carved from timber and smoke, the trading post. Nestled in a hollow, the structure is a patchwork of logs, canvas, and snow drift. A crooked sign reads Turner's Post in letters that may have been carved with a dull spoon. Smoke curls from the chimney. Outside, a horse stomps near the hitching post, icicles hanging from its manet-like tinsel. You approach, dragging your sled around the side and parking it beside a stack of firewood taller than you. Inside, the door creaks open with the jingle of a bell, and you're hit with warmth. Real, actual warmth. A stove roars in the corner. Shelves line the walls, tin goods, tools, cloth, a few worn books. It smells like smoke, spice, and wet wool. A few others are inside already, bundled in coats, leaning near the stove, boots steaming. Turner himself, bald, bearded, always chewing on something, is perched behind the counter, weighing nails on a brass scale. He grunts in greeting. That's as friendly as he gets. You pull back your scarf and nod to the others. A woman from 2 ridges over is trading a jar of pickled beets for lamp oil. A trapper near the door is negotiating the value of an otter pelt like it's fine art. You recognize a few faces, nod to them, and set your goods on the counter. Turner eyes your raccoon pelt, turns it over with calloused fingers, and shrugs. Fair. Which, in Turner speak, means excellent. You barter. Coffee's expensive, but you manage a small pouch. You trade the rabbit pelts for salt, soap, and a wedge of cheese so hard you could probably use it as a weapon. You even score a stubby candle and a half bottle of liniment that smells like regret but works miracles on sore muscles. Historians still argue whether trading posts were the backbone of Western survival or just overglorified general stores. But for people like you, they're lifelines. Places where goods and gossip flow, where loneliness is thinned out by shared stories and heated rooms. You linger a bit longer, close to the stove, eavesdropping on a conversation about a wolf sighting near the old mill road. One man swears he saw it take down a deer as big as a cow. Another rolls his eyes, muttering something about cabin fever and exaggeration. Eventually, you load up and say your goodbyes. Turner grunts again. Might have meant stay warm, or maybe don't die. Hard to say. The trip back feels heavier. Not just because of the goods, but because the sun's already starting its slow slide down. The snow looks less friendly now. You hurry, sled dragging behind you, slipping on old tracks and trying not to think about how many miles you've still got left. You pass through the frozen creek again, carefully this time. You remember the story of a boy who went through the ice last year. Barely made it. Lost 2 toes. Still walks like he's dancing. You test every step, poke ahead with your stick, and make it across without incident. Back at camp, your fire's out, naturally, but you've got matches today. Glorious, beautiful, store-bought matches. You light one like it's a celebration and get the fire going fast. Then comes the inventory. The coffee goes into a tin, labeled like a crown jewel. The cheese gets wrapped in cloth and hidden. The candle, unlit, becomes a centerpiece. You may not have furniture, but you've got ambience. You sit back, exhausted but satisfied. Your world just got a little bigger and a lot warmer. You sip pine tea, dunk a biscuit in broth, and let yourself feel something dangerous, hope. Because sometimes, survival isn't just about food or fire. It's about finding that one place where the stove is hot, the shelves are stocked, and for an hour you're not alone. You'd think kids in the Wild West had it easier in winter, tucked inside by the fire with stories and soup. But you'd be wrong. The cold didn't care how small you were, it bit just as hard, and sometimes worse. And snow days? Those weren't days off. They were just snow plus chores. You wake up to the sound of a tin cup clanging against a kettle and muffled footsteps crunching past your tent. It's the neighbor's kids, already up, already working, already freezing. You pull your scarf up and poke your head outside. Sure enough, there's little Tommy, maybe 8 years old, hauling a bundle of sticks twice his size toward the cabin like a determined, frost-bitten ant. You trudge over, coffee in hand, and exchange nods with the neighbor, Martha. She's stirring something in a pot outside, likely mush. Again. Her daughter Annie, all of 10, is chopping ice with a hatchet to fill their water bucket. And she's smiling. That kind of wild, red-cheeked grin that makes you wonder if children are immune to discomfort or just too stubborn to admit it. It's not that kids had less to do. They had everything to do, just smaller gloves to do it with. Chop wood. Feed animals. Patch clothes. Haul water. Melt snow. Shovel snow. Walk through snow. And then? Go to bed wearing 3 pairs of socks and a hat that used to belong to a raccoon. And let's talk about shoes. Boots, if they had them, were usually handed down from someone with a completely different foot size. You'd see little girls wearing boots the size of dinner platters, stuffed with straw and layered socks. Some kids just wrapped their feet in burlap and hope. Historians still argue whether frontier children were tougher or just more traumatized. Honestly, it's probably both. When your average day includes frostbite, hot ash burns, and milking a goat that hates you, you either build character or lose your mind. You remember talking to an old rancher once who said, "I didn't know I was cold as a boy, I just thought that's how winter felt." He told stories of sleeping 5 to a bed, arms tangled, feet tucked under the family dog, the air so cold their breath froze on the ceiling beams. The next morning? Chores before breakfast. Always. Martha's kids seemed content enough, building a tiny fort out of firewood scraps and snow blocks. It's half play, half survival engineering. You watch as they pat down the walls with mittened hands, giggling like they're not working with numb fingers. Inside the cabin, you know their bed is a lumpy mattress stuffed with straw and old shirts. Their pillows are flour sacks. Their blanket? A patchwork of whatever wasn't already turned into pants. But kids had tricks. One common game you've seen, hot hands. 2 kids sit face to face, hands cupped together, and blow warm breath into them while whispering secrets. Not for fun, okay, partly for fun, but mostly to keep circulation going. Another? The foot race. Not really a race. More like an excuse to stomp in place and call it a game. Winner got the last spoon of stew, or the dry socks. High stakes. You remember Annie telling you last week that she lined her mittens with crushed pine needles because they smell like not being bored. You're not entirely sure what that means, but it felt true somehow. Inside their cabin, you notice something that gives you pause: drawings. Pinned along the wood walls, carefully preserved, little scenes sketched in charcoal. A rabbit. A tree. What looks like you, awkwardly tall, next to a snowman that's falling over. There's joy here. Not comfort, maybe, but resilience. These kids aren't just surviving, they're building snowball stockpiles behind the smokehouse, they're naming icicles like pets, and they're turning icicles into make-believe swords. You lend a hand splitting kindling with Tommy, who narrates every chop like he's the hero in some grand adventure. And then the woodman, bold and brave, struck the log with his mighty axe. You nearly miss your swing laughing. By afternoon, the kids have moved to the back of the cabin and are playing frozen statues. Basically, you stand still until someone blinks. Or sneezes. Or a pine cone falls on your head. High art. Dinner for them is a thin stew with bits of potato, a few precious carrots, and something you suspect used to be a squirrel. They invite you in, offer a cup. You don't refuse. Everyone eats by the fire, sitting cross-legged on the dirt floor. The kids lean into their mother, warm and tired and still whispering jokes about how you nearly slipped in the snow earlier. You did. They saw. As the light fades, Martha gathers the children and starts wrapping them like burritos, blanket layers, scarves, then a giant buffalo robe. All three disappear into one lumpy pile near the hearth. They'll sleep curled together, cheeks flushed, socks to socks, dreams hopefully far from frost. You take a final sip of stew and say your good nights. Outside, the stars blink like frost in the sky. Your own camp waits. You're older. Sore. You'll feel it in your back tomorrow. But the laughter of freezing children is still ringing in your ears, and somehow, the cold doesn't feel quite as sharp. You've been surviving winter by sheer stubbornness and a growing collection of patchwork clothing, but today you're walking into wisdom, literally. You're headed east through the forest, where the trail curves along the frozen creek, toward the camp of the Big Elk Band, who've weathered more winters here than your entire bloodline put together. You walk slowly, respectfully. This isn't a supply run or a trade visit, it's a lesson. If anyone knows how to survive in a world where snow eats sound and breath turns brittle, it's the people who've lived with the land instead of against it. They see you before you see them. It's always like that. One moment, you're alone on the trail. The next, a shape emerges from the trees, calm, upright, wrapped in a coat made of tanned moose hide, with snowshoes wider and better made than yours will ever be. A nod. No words. You nod back. You enter the camp quietly, taking in the tight semicircle of lodges, the smoke rising in lazy spirals, the paths tamped down by careful feet. There's color here, beaded bands on mittens, dyed quill work on parka sleeves, bright sashes peeking through layers of hide and wool. Even in the dead of winter, nothing looks dead. You're met by morning wind, a woman old enough to have grandkids, sharp enough to make you forget how cold it is. She wears a robe made of woven rabbit skins, lighter than buffalo but every bit as warm. She beckons you toward her fire with the ease of someone who's hosted the elements themselves. She hands you a bowl, bone white, filled with something thick, steaming, and slightly green. You sniff. You sip. It's spruce tip and fat boiled into broth. It tastes like the forest floor and somehow makes your ribs feel warmer. Eat the trees when you can't eat anything else, she says. They remember how to survive. You try not to look too amazed. She shows you around. Their shelters are lined with birch bark and stitched with sinew. Snow is used, not just endured. They pack it high around the base of their homes to seal out the wind. The fire pit is sunken, keeping the heat low and even. Thick hides hang along the inner walls, absorbing warmth, dulling drafts. One man is sharpening bone tools, his mittens tied to his wrists with cords so they dangle if he needs bare fingers for detail work. A girl is weaving something you can't identify from reeds that shouldn't be visible this time of year, but somehow, they've been preserved, dried, stored. Planning. Foresight. All the things the cold demands. Historians still argue whether settlers adapted well to indigenous winter survival methods or arrogantly ignored them until they nearly froze. You've got your opinion, and it rhymes with they should have listened the first time. you sit by the fire, listening to morning wind talk about snow walls, how to stack them, how to angle them, how to make them thick enough to block wind but thin enough not to collapse. She draws a pattern in the ash, showing you how to build a heat-trapping trench around a fire ring. You take notes in your head because your hands are too busy being warm. She explains the value of layered moccasins, 2 pairs, each stuffed with dry moss. Changed often, like socks. Keeps the sweat away. Keeps the toes intact. You look down at your own boots and feel slightly betrayed by them. Then there's the fur trick. Fur inward. Always inward. Everyone thinks the hair should face out, it looks prettier. But no. The warmth lives next to the skin. That's the rule. If it's hide side in, you're halfway to frostbite. She says it like she's said it 1,000 times. You suspect she has. And then there's the fringe. Yes, fringe. Apparently, those long strands hanging from coats and mittens aren't just decorative. They wick water. Snow melts off the fringe before it soaks the body of the garment. It drips away. You stare at your sleeve, no fringe. You feel underdressed. Later, morning wind shows you their winter fire starter, a bundle of cedar bark soaked in fat, wrapped tight in birch bark like a burrito of warmth. She lights it with flint, and it flares instantly. You feel like you've just witnessed sorcery. She calls it practicality. And then there's snowshoes. Yours are okay if you enjoy frequent faceplants. The ones she shows you are wide, long, curved like a canoe. Woven with gut or sinew, light as breath, silent in the snow. You lift one. It feels like air. You ask how long it takes to make one. She shrugs. Depends if you want it done right. By the time you leave, your pockets are full of pine resin, your mind full of ideas, and your ego very, very small. You walk home slower than usual, trying not to disturb the hush that hangs between snowflakes. You're thinking about the spruce-tip broth, about fringe, about heat hiding in design. Surviving the cold isn't about overpowering it. It's about outsmarting it. Living alongside it. Borrowing from it without being devoured by it. Tonight, back at your camp, you hang your snowshoes by the fire and start carving new ones. You stitch moss into your boots. You turn your fur cloak inside out. You eat pine needles. And for the first time all winter, you feel like you're not just surviving. You're learning. The night wraps around your shelter like a thick, wet blanket, except it's not warm, or soft, or even polite. It's one of those nights. The kind where cold gets personal. You lie there in your fur cocoon, staring at the low ceiling, watching your breath swirl into tiny clouds that dance briefly above your face before freezing on the inside of the canvas. The fire is embers now, glowing faintly. Not dead, but not helpful. You pull the buffalo robe up to your chin, then over your head, and still your nose stings like it's being punished for crimes it hasn't committed. Sleep, meanwhile, plays hard to get. Your bed is a pile of pelts layered with desperation. Underneath, cold ground. Always cold. The earth doesn't believe in insulation. You've laid down straw, old clothing, even flattened sacks to create a barrier, but somehow the cold still finds the softest spot on your back and settles there like a smug cat. Your toes ache. Not the sharp, stabbing frostbite kind, but the slow, dull, ghostly throb of limbs reconsidering their allegiance to your body. You wiggle them. They complain. You rub your feet together. The friction helps, but not much. You try counting stars. Then sheep. Then regrets. Nothing works. Welcome to the icy eternity of the frontier night. Historians still argue whether sleep deprivation or starvation was more dangerous in these conditions. But you've seen it firsthand, how sleep, or the lack of it, can unravel a person faster than a loose hem. The cold doesn't just freeze your body. It gnaws at your thoughts. You lie there, brain looping strange images, dreams slipping in even before your eyes close. One night last week, you swore you heard singing in the snow. No one else did. Another time, you woke convinced your boots had crawled away in protest. Spoiler, they hadn't. But it took you 10 minutes to be sure. Tonight, the silence is thick. Too thick. You listen closely and realize what's missing: the wind. That ever-present howl has faded. The quiet is almost eerie. You sit up and poke your head out of the tent. The world is blue. Not dark, not black, blue, like it's been dipped in glacier water. Snow stretches in every direction, glistening under the moon. It's beautiful. It's breathtaking. It's also a trap. You know nights like this. No wind, no clouds, means colder than usual. Means frost so sharp it can cut through a canvas seam. Means you're not going to sleep anytime soon. You retreat inside and pull on your extra socks. They are stiff. Not frozen, but judging you. You add another scarf. Tuck your hands between your thighs. Then make the risky decision: you relight the fire. It's not smart, maybe. You've only got so much fuel, and you were saving some for breakfast. But right now, it's either a warm fire or a slow descent into madness, and frankly, you've got enough on your plate. You strike a match. The flare is almost aggressive in the quiet. You cradle it, feed it slivers of dry bark, then larger twigs, and finally, the good stuff, your last split logs. The fire catches, and warmth, blessed warmth, pushes back the creeping chill. You sigh. Maybe even whimper. No one's here to judge. As the flames grow, you thaw. Not completely, but enough. You lie back, eyes fluttering, letting the light play across the walls. You try again to sleep. And then, drip. You blink. Another drip. You reach up. The inside of the tent is weeping. Your breath, your body heat, and now the fire have melted the frost on the canvas. It's now dripping back down in a slow, vengeful rhythm. You roll away. It follows. You pull the buffalo hide tighter. It seeps through the edges. Perfect. You remember a trick someone once told you: stretch a cloth top under the ceiling of your shelter to catch drips. Slight tilt. One corner lower, so water runs and collects away from your bed. You haven't done that. Future you might. Tonight you just shifts again, curses quietly, and hopes the drip finds another victim. Still, at some point, you drift. Not all the way. But enough for your body to loosen, for your mind to float. And that's when the dreams start. Not the warm ones. Oh no. These are ice dreams. You're walking barefoot across a frozen lake that never ends. Your breath turns to snowflakes. Your teeth fall out as icicles. A bear made of frost laughs at you. The moon asks why you didn't add a second blanket. You wake up sweating, except you're not sweating. You're just cold and confused. It's only been 20 minutes. You sip some melted snow from a tin. The cold settles in your gut like a stone. You try the rabbit gloves as mittens. Wrap your feet in the leftover robe corner. Anything. Eventually, dawn sneaks in. Not a sunrise. Just a pale glow. An apology for light. You sit up, bones aching, Back creaking. You check your fingers, your toes. All there. All mostly functional. You survived another night of sleepless, icy delirium. You stretch. Stand. Groan. Step outside. The morning is cruelly beautiful, powdered snow sparkling, sky too bright, breath still visible. You whisper to no one in particular, try harder, next time. Maybe to the cold. Maybe to yourself. But hey, you're still here. Still stubborn. Still sleepy. And probably due for a nap. There's something wrong with the sky. You notice it the moment you step outside. It's mid-morning, but the light's off, dimmer, flatter, almost colorless. The clouds aren't overhead exactly. They're around you. Low. Heavy. Creeping in with quiet confidence, like a cat that already owns the room. And then the wind changes. It doesn't blow, it presses. A steady, solid push against your chest, like the weather's trying to lean you backward. The air sharpens. You can feel it pricking your skin through your scarf, sneaking down the collar of your coat like a cold-blooded thief. You know what this is. A whiteout is coming. The term sounds almost poetic, whiteout, but what it really means is that the sky is about to fall in, sideways, and erase the world like chalk from a blackboard. You act fast. First, the sled. You lash it tight, cover the supplies with oilcloth, and weigh it down with firewood. Second, fire prep. You set kindling, dry moss, and your best starter log under your shelter flap. If this lasts more than a few hours, you'll need a fast relight. Third, you tie a rope from your tent post to the main trail, just 10 feet long. That rope might be the only thing between you and being lost in your own yard. Because when a whiteout hits, you lose everything: sight, direction, sound. Even your thoughts start to feel muffled. By noon, the snow begins. Not the gentle, storybook flakes. These fall sideways, fast and stinging, like they've been fired from a slingshot. The world turns grey, then greyish-white, then just white. You blink and your eyelashes stick together. You turn your head and immediately forget which way you were facing. You follow the rope back into the tent like a diver surfacing through fog. Historians still argue whether blizzards or whiteouts caused more deaths on the frontier. They often went hand in hand, but whiteouts? They were sneakier. Blizzards shouted. Whiteouts whispered you into a slow, confused, frozen end. You sit near the flap, wrapped in every pelt you own, listening to the storm build. Snow piles up in minutes. You've seen people disappear 5 feet from their own cabin. One woman wandered in a circle around her well until she collapsed, only 10 feet from the door. There's no waiting it out outside. No heroism here. Just smart decisions and a whole lot of blankets. Inside your tent, the wind snaps the canvas like a sail caught mid-turn. You brace a support beam with a stick and say a silent thank you to whoever invented pine tar and rawhide rope. You light the fire, not because it's cold, though, let's be real, it's always cold, but because the glow helps your brain remember where you are. Time slows in a whiteout. An hour feels like 3. You stir soup. You sharpen a knife. You listen to the wind hum through the seams. You adjust your layers. You poke the fire. You do not go outside. At one point, you stick your head out for half a second. Just to check. The rope is invisible. Your sled is buried. The tree 20 feet away is gone. Just endless white. Even the sound is different, muted, like the world's been wrapped in cotton. You remember a story about a trapper who got caught in a whiteout while hauling firewood. He tied one end of a rope to his belt, the other to his sled. Made it 200 yards before the rope snapped on a tree branch. He turned around to find it. Never found the sled. Never found home either. They discovered his frozen body a week later, facing the wrong direction, less than 30 paces from his cabin. You've thought about tying a longer rope. Maybe you will. Maybe when this one ends. Hours pass. You play cards with yourself. 3 hands. You lose to the left hand, then accuse the right of cheating. It's fine. It's normal. The wind answers in applause. You check your water pot. Melted snow's almost gone. You open a flap to collect more and are blasted with frozen air that tastes like metal and spite. You refill the pot and slam the flap closed. Everything inside is dusted with snow now, including you. You shake off and return to your fire. It's a little smaller than before. You feed it more carefully, rationing the good logs, burning bark and twigs first. The storm could last hours. Or days. Or just long enough to mess with your plans. You think of others caught in this. The Dobbins family, in their sod house. Tommy and Annie may be playing cards too, huddled by their little iron stove. Martha, probably pacing, checking the roof for leaks. And Big Elk's camp, where the snow is just another tool, more shelter, more insulation, more opportunity. You envy that wisdom. That calm. The whiteout begins to slow around dusk. You sense it more than see it. The wind loses its voice. The flakes fall in silence. The air stills, but the world remains blank. Colorless. Erased. You step outside with the rope in one hand, eyes squinting, breath shallow. The sled is a snow mound. The tree reappears, faintly. The horizon is back. The world is sketching itself in again, one faint line at a time. You made it. You turn to go back inside and find the flap of your tent already swinging in the breeze. You pause. Did you close it? You're not sure. You step inside, tie it shut, and sit by the fire, letting your fingers warm. You won't sleep much tonight. That's fine. You survived a whiteout. And out here, that makes you an expert. Sometimes you don't make it back in time. The sky turns faster than your legs can carry you. 1 minute, it's just another cold afternoon. The next, the wind swings hard out of the north, and the snow begins to fall like it's got something to prove. You were only out looking for firewood, 20 minutes, you told yourself. An easy haul. But now your tracks are gone, the wind screaming, and the idea of reaching camp feels about as realistic as beach weather. You know better than to panic. Panic burns energy and heat. So you do the smart thing. You dig. It starts small. A hollow in a drift beneath a stand of fir trees. You've heard the phrase before, if you can't get home, make one. And that's exactly what you're doing, carving a shelter out of snow and stubbornness. The shovel? Back at camp. So you use your gloved hands, a flat piece of bark, and eventually, the toe of your boot. You scoop, pack, scoop, pack. You keep it low, narrow, wind-blocked. Your breath fogs inside the growing hollow, and you feel the warmth start to collect around you, even as your fingers go numb. It's not elegant, but it works. You're building a snow cave. Historians still argue whether early settlers learned this technique from indigenous groups or stumbled onto it by accident while failing to not die. Either way, snow caves became a quiet survival trick. If the storm outpaces you, make shelter fast, make it smart, and wait. You dig until your arms scream, then line the floor with fir branches, pine needles, and your spare mittens, anything to get yourself off the snow. You brace a corner with a broken limb. You pack the inner walls tighter with your body heat. You shape the roof with a slight dome so melt won't drip directly on your face. Then you crawl in, pulling your scarf tight across your mouth, and breathe slow. The change is immediate. It's still cold, but the bite is gone. The wind is blocked. The noise, muffled. You're in a bubble of snow and silence, and your own breath is starting to warm the air around you. You can almost feel your fingers again. Outside, the storm escalates, snow whipping past like daggers. Inside, your little hollow glows faintly blue. You light a sliver of candle, a stub you keep in your coat for emergencies, and press your hands close. The flicker is weak, but in here, it feels like a sun. It's strange how snow, which can kill you in layers, can also save you when shaped right. You chew on a piece of jerky, sip melted snow from your tin cup. You ration every movement. Efficiency is everything now. Your body is a battery, and you're in power saver mode. You lean back against the curved wall and recall something morning wind once told you: if the land traps you, it's not punishment, it's instruction. Listen carefully. You're listening now. There are stories of settlers caught miles from camp, who built storm cellars into the hills, little dugouts, reinforced with logs and sealed with snow. One man you met last year had a whole system of winter bolt holes, each stocked with tinder and lard. Insurance, he'd called it. You thought he was paranoid. Now you think he was brilliant. Another trick: dig low, then build high. If you can't carve a cave, you can always pile up a dome. Snow blocks, packed tight, stacked in circles. Like an igloo, but rougher, cruder, colder. But still warm enough. A windbreak, a fire pit, a place to curl up and tell yourself stories until the sky forgives you. You remember the first time you heard about a man who survived 3 days in a snow cave with nothing but a dead squirrel and a deck of cards. He ate the squirrel. Played solitaire. Survived. Swore the Jack of Spades was giving him advice by the end. You check your pockets. No squirrel. No cards. But you've got beef fat wrapped in wax paper, a tin matchbox, and the kind of nerves that only winter can polish. The storm howls outside. Inside, you hum to yourself. Something off-key. Something warm. Eventually, your eyes begin to close. You fight it. You know the dangers. Sleep in the cold isn't just sleep, it's a slow, soft exit. So you sit up, slap your arms, stretch your legs, hum louder. You nibble the fat. You sip the snow melt. You whisper nonsense to yourself. But eventually, your body wins. You curl in, tucked tight in your buffalo coat, and drift, not fully, but close. The snow walls hum. The wind tries to find you but can't. You're a ghost in a bubble of silence. Hours pass. Maybe more. It's hard to say. When you finally crawl out, the storm has passed. The world is pale and still, blanketed in clean, untouched snow. Your camp is still out there, just a mile or two west. The sun is rising, painting the horizon in soft gold. You survived. Not by outrunning the cold. By outsmarting it. You look back at your snow cave, just a lump now, a forgotten shape in a sea of white, and smile. You pat its side. Say thank you. Then turn, shoulders stiff, legs aching, but heart burning with that small, stubborn fire that winter still hasn't managed to snuff out. Silence can be loud. And in the wild winter west, silence doesn't just settle, it seeps. through the cracks in your cabin walls, through the gaps in conversation, through the space between letters that never come. You sit by the fire, watching it crackle in rhythm with your thoughts, and you realize something: you haven't spoken to another soul in 6 days. 6 days of wind, stew, chores, and that internal monologue you swore wouldn't start sounding like your grandmother. Too late. You reach for the old tin box near your bedding, the one where you keep letters. Some of them are smudged, creased from reading and rereading, like maybe looking at the same handwriting again will make it mean more. One envelope smells like lavender. One is written entirely in pencil, the words fading like a whispered goodbye. But there hasn't been a new one in a while. And out here, the mail is a mood. A compass. Proof that the world still turns. You glance at the door, half expecting a knock that never comes. The last time you saw the post rider, he was bundled like a swaddled ghost, arriving on a half-frozen horse with frost stuck in his eyebrows and a face that said, "I charge extra for blizzards." You gave him a slab of salt pork and sent 3 letters with him. One to your brother. One to someone you'd maybe loved. One to no one, just for the act of writing. None have come back. You step outside into a windless grey morning and walk to the split-log mailbox you built last year. It stands like a crooked monument in the snow, tilted to the side like it's tired of pretending. You open the little lid, already knowing it's empty. Still, you check twice. Still, you sigh. Historians still argue whether mail service on the frontier was heroic or simply chaotic. The reality? It was both. Riders braved whiteouts, wolves, and frozen rivers just to deliver 3 letters and a questionable newspaper. A miracle system held together by horses, frost-bitten fingers, and the absolute refusal to let people forget each other. When the post did arrive, it was an event. Neighbors came together, bundled in scarves and hope, passing around messages like gold nuggets. A letter meant someone still remembered you. Someone cared. Someone was alive. Back in the cabin, you light a candle and pull out your journal. If no letters are coming, you'll send one into the future. You write to yourself. To your descendants. To no one. Pages of ink, ramblings about stew and snowfall and how sometimes the silence rings in your ears like a bell you can't unhear. You pause. Then you scribble out a quick note for the next post rider, just in case. It reads, "Still here. Still warm. Still waiting. Me." You tuck it into an envelope, seal it with wax from your last candle nub, and place it beside the door. Ready. Even if the rider doesn't come for weeks. Isolation plays tricks. You once spent an entire afternoon talking to the stew pot like it was an old friend. You gave it a name, Jeremiah, and congratulated it on its seasoning. You didn't realize how far you'd gone until you caught yourself apologizing when you dropped the ladle. You try to stay sane. You whistle. You carve tiny figures into your cabin wall. You've been working on a miniature scene, tiny trees, a tiny fire, and a tiny version of you with a buffalo robe and what can only be described as seasonal sadness. One night, you even threw a party. Just you, a potato, and 2 cups of pine tea. You set one for yourself, one for the wind. You toasted to still being vertical. The wind didn't reply. Rude. The thing is, humans aren't built for this kind of quiet. We need voices. Even ones we don't agree with. Even the guy at the trading post who insists he once fought a blizzard with a frying pan. You miss that guy. He was ridiculous. And warm. You check your old harmonica. One reed's broken, but it still wheezes a tune when you blow gently. You play something slow, something minor. The sound floats into the corners of the cabin and stays there. Even your stove creaks in appreciation. Outside, snow falls again. You watch it coat the mailbox, soft and silent. No one's coming today. Probably not tomorrow. But maybe soon. Maybe next week the rider will appear on a frostbitten pony, coat crusted with ice, holding a letter with your name on it. Maybe someone's thinking of you right now, writing with cold fingers, wondering if you're still out here. You hope so. Until then, you wait. You write. You whisper to the fire. And you remind yourself, even in silence, you're still part of something bigger. Something unwritten, but unfolding. Sometimes survival looks like a trapline or a good fire. And sometimes it looks like an old kettle full of hot rocks and ingenuity. You've lived through enough cold mornings now to know that cleverness can outrun strength, and that the right tool, no matter how weird or improvised, might just mean the difference between frozen and fine. So today, you're doing a little frontier tinkering. Welcome to your new favorite game, Frontier Engineering. You kneel by the stove and lift out the kettle you've repurposed 3 times already. It used to boil water. Then it held pine sap. Then it doubled as a mousetrap, don't ask. Today, it becomes a foot warmer. You load it with hot stones from the fire, wrap the lid in rags, and slide it under your bedroll like a medieval space heater. One of your smarter choices this week. And you're just getting started. You've seen some wild tools out here, everything from gut-string snow goggles to barrel-stave sleds. People made what they didn't have, fixed what shouldn't have worked, and reused things even when they were half-ash and splinters. Out here, creativity isn't a luxury, it's armor. You step outside and head to the tool shed. Well, shed is generous. It's a leaning rectangle made of warp boards and wishful thinking, but it keeps your precious cache of inventions dry. Today's goal? Rebuild your snowshoe bindings. Again. The rawhide stretched too tight and snapped last night when you weren't looking. Now the shoe flaps like a bored fish when you walk. You've got rawhide strips soaking in a tin cup near the fire. Once softened, they'll be pliable enough to thread through the frame, then dry stiff and strong. You sit on an overturned bucket, threading with gloved fingers and occasionally whispering encouragement to the leather like it's a nervous horse. Nearby, your snow scoop, fashioned from a broken barrel lid and part of a pitchfork, is leaning proudly against the wall. It's ugly. Really ugly. But it moved a full drift last week when the roof threatened to collapse, so you're emotionally attached now. Inside your cabin, the hacks begin to pile up. Your lantern? Modified with a bit of rabbit wire to double as a cooking hook. Your socks? Stuffed with dried moss and sage to absorb sweat and keep things tolerable. You even added a flap of hide to your mitten cuff, a little pocket for flint. Because nothing says prepared like having fire literally on hand. Historians still argue whether ingenuity or grit carried frontier folks through the worst winters. But anyone who's ever used a bent nail to fix a sleigh runner knows the truth, smart beats strong every time. You remember a story from the Trading Post about a woman who rigged her chimney flue with an old music box gear so it could be turned from inside without opening the draft door. She saved fuel. She avoided frostbite. She became a legend. You've seen sled runners made from strip fence rails. Snow goggles carved from bark, slit to reduce glare. One man stitched his coat using horsehair and a fishbone needle. It looked like a mess, but the wind never got through it. Your own proudest creation? The snowshoe rack above your fire, built from saplings and nailed to the ceiling at an angle to dry gear without scorching it. Your socks, mittens, and regrets hang up there every night. And don't forget your rawhide laces. You've used them to fix boots, tie firewood bundles, mend snowshoes, and once, in a moment of cold-induced desperation, as a belt. Slightly crunchy, but effective. You head outside again, this time to check your ice pit, basically a snowbank turned refrigerator. You dig out a small wooden crate packed with venison, still perfectly frozen. The pit is lined with old flour sacks and straw to prevent scavengers. Smart. Who? Until a fox learned how to tug the rope and lifted out your last haunch of meat like a magician pulling a rabbit out of a hat. You respect the hustle. You've since added a rock lid and 2 very judgmental-looking wooden owls. Later, as the sun drops low, you put finishing touches on a new experiment, a sled puller made from the bent head of a broken shovel and some spare rope. You test it on the packed snow near camp. It doesn't look promising, but it slides easier than dragging raw sled rope through your palms. You grin. Victory! The fire crackles as you step back into your cabin. You hang up the snowshoe with its freshly bound webbing and place your hot rock kettle under the furs. You toss another log into the stove and wipe your hands on your pants, which now double as a notebook for your inventions, small sketches in charcoal running up one thigh. You glance around your cabin, proud. It's still crooked. Still smoky. Still smells faintly of bacon and birch bark. But it's clever. And it's yours. Out here, the cold doesn't just test your strength, it tests your creativity. Your ability to look at a bent spoon and think, if I attach this to a stick, I could clean the chimney without climbing up there and risking my spine. And tomorrow? You've got plans. There's a broken lantern, some leftover birch bark, and that mysterious metal hinge you found by the river last spring. You don't know what it'll be yet, but give it time. The frontier always answers creativity with quiet applause. You've walked on plenty of strange surfaces in your time, frozen mud, pine needles, questionable floorboards, but today, you walk on water. Well, technically, you slide on water. The river's iced over, thick and pale beneath your boots, and your sled skims across its surface with barely a whisper. It's like traveling through a glass world, smooth and silent. A little too silent, actually. You glance down. Through a cloudy patch, you can see frozen bubbles and cracks that spider out like lightning bolts caught in pores. They say when the river freezes like this, deep, solid, and glassy, it's safe to cross. Safe being a generous word, of course. You glance at the shoreline one more time, tighten the rope around your waist, and keep going. The ice moans under you, long, low sounds, like the river's unhappy stomach. It's not cracking, not yet, but it's got opinions. And a personality. Rivers in the Wild West were lifelines during the warmer months, sources of fish, fresh water, transport routes. But in winter? They became highways for the desperate, the daring, and the folks who ran out of patience for snowdrifts and decided to gamble with ice. Historians still argue whether river crossing sped up trade or just sped up heart attacks. Because it's one thing to slide across a frozen creek with a sled full of firewood. It's another thing entirely when you hear that echoing pop from below and realize the ice is considering your application for passage. Your boots are fitted with makeshift cleats, old nails hammered through the soles, bent flat. They give you just enough grip to avoid a cartoon-style wipeout. The sled's runners, greased with tallow, glide like a dream. You've got a good rhythm now. Pull, slide, step, listen. Pull, slide, step, listen. The air is sharp but calm. No wind. Just the occasional groan of the river and the crunch of your boots. You pass a stand of cottonwoods on the right bank, their branches dusted with snow, and see the trail marker someone carved into a trunk, a simple arrow, worn by time. You're halfway to the logging camp. The camp needs supplies, dried meat, resin, and, most importantly, news. A river path shaves hours off the overland route. But the ice? The ice always asks for something in return. You remember the story of young Pete, a mule driver who tried to cross too early one year. Swore the ice would hold. It didn't. His sled went under, along with half his tools. He managed to crawl out, soaked to the bone, and spent the next 3 months recovering in a hayloft with one working hand and a permanent fear of water. He still flinches when anyone whistles near a frozen pond. You're not Pete. You know how to test the ice. You carry a pole, tap in front of every step. You keep a coil of rope at your side and wear your pack loosely, ready to shrug it off if you hear that fateful crack. You're prepared. You've even got claws, well, ice picks, strapped to your wrists like frontier jewelry. If you fall in, these tiny metal spikes might just help you pull yourself back onto the surface. That, or they'll be stylish accessories for your frostbitten ghost. Either way, they're coming along. And yet, there's beauty here. The river reflects the pale sky. The snow on the bank sits undisturbed. It's like walking through a still life, one where the canvas might collapse at any second. A frozen miracle, held together by tension and timing. Midway, you spot animal tracks skimming across the far end of the ice, fox, maybe. Or coyote. You follow them with your eyes, wondering if they trust the river more than you do. They don't weigh much. They don't think twice. You reach the halfway point and pause. You kneel, check the ice thickness through a crack near the bank. Still good. 2, maybe 3 solid inches. The rule is for to be safe. But you're light, and your sled's packed low. It'll hold. Probably. You keep going. And then, without warning, crack. It's sharp, close, and hungry. You freeze. No pun intended. The sound echoes beneath your boots. Not a break. Not yet. But the ice is telling you it's tired of your confidence. You glance back. Too far to turn around now. Forward, then. Slow. Deliberate. You step again. The ice creaks like a door hinge. You crouch, distributing your weight, and slide the sled beside you like it's holding its breath. Every second is a negotiation with gravity. Finally, after what feels like 3 separate lifetimes, you reach the other side. The bank rises gently, shaded by a leaning pine. You step off the ice and feel solid ground beneath your boots again. You could cry. You don't, but you could. You glance back at the river. It looks peaceful. Serene. Innocent. Like it didn't just try to murder you with elegance. Later, when you reach the logging camp, the crew cheers. Not for you, exactly, but for the supplies. The cook nearly tackles you over the sack of tallow. You drink hot broth, sit by their fire, and let your heartbeat return to a less dramatic rhythm. One of the loggers asks if the river's passable. You shrug. Depends if it likes you. You stay the night in a bunk that smells like cedar and sweat. The next morning, you retrace your steps, faster this time, lighter, wiser. The ice holds. It always does. Until it doesn't. But today? Today it's your road. And you've learned how to listen. You didn't think much of it at first, just a dog curling up beside you on a cold night. Practical. Friendly. Covered in enough fur to qualify as your new best heating source. But over time, you realized something essential about winter out here. Sometimes, warmth has a heartbeat. You're not alone in your shelter tonight. At your side lies Daisy, your mutt of mysterious origins, possibly part shepherd, part bear rug. She breathes slow and steady, steam puffing from her snout with each exhale, and you can feel the heat coming off her in waves. She's pressed against your legs like she knows exactly which bones ache the worst. Not to get dramatic, but this dog may be the only reason your toes still exist. You scratch her behind the ears. She yawns and doesn't open her eyes. Smart girl. Animal companionship on the frontier wasn't just for fun or the occasional rabbit alert, it was strategy. Dogs, cats, goats, even chickens, anything that gave off heat and didn't mind sleeping close was basically a hot water bottle with opinions. Historians still argue whether frontier families kept animals indoors out of necessity or sentimentality. The answer is yes. People grew attached. Of course they did. But when the temperatures dipped low enough to make your breath crack, you didn't get picky about your bedtime cuddle buddies. You've heard stories of people sleeping in shifts so their animals could rotate in and out of the warm spot. One neighbor told you her goat used to sleep curled at her back, and when it died, she swore the nights felt 20 degrees colder. You believe her. Your own cabin is, let's say, flexible on the whole indoor versus outdoor thing. The door has a slight lean. The walls have character, red holes. And the line between this is where people sleep and this is where the livestock visits has blurred into one cozy, fur-covered compromise. You remember one night in particular, cold enough that even your fire seemed reluctant to flame. You woke up under your usual mountain of furs, shivering anyway, only to find Daisy had snuck inside and flopped across your feet. Like a mobile heating pad with bad breath. You didn't even scold her. You just whispered, "Thank you," and went back to sleep. Tonight, it's not just her. The two goats are inside again. Not because they're pets, though one of them seems to think otherwise, but because the wind nearly knocked the latch off their shed. You opened the door and they came trotting in like they owned the place. Now they're curled near the hearth, one of them occasionally snoring. Loudly. There's a kind of quiet comfort in it. You remember stories of Arctic explorers sleeping with their sled dogs inside their tents, the animals forming a tight circle with humans in the center. A heat wheel. Not glamorous, but effective. You're reenacting your own little version right now, minus the polar bears and national acclaim. Even cats, for all their smug independence, earned their spot by the fire. A good mouser kept the food safe and the bedding unchewed. And when they weren't on duty, you'd find them curled atop the warmest log, claiming it like royalty. You once visited a settler who swore his cat saved his life by lying across his chest during a particularly brutal night. The cat, he said, never let him forget it. You look down at Daisy, whose legs just kicked in her sleep. She's dreaming, probably of chasing rabbits or harassing the neighbor's mule. You smile, then pull the edge of your blanket over her side. She grumbles, but doesn't move. You sip warm broth and listen to the creak of the roof. The goats shuffle. One of them lets out a sigh that sounds weirdly human. You add a log to the fire and stretch your legs under Daisy's warm bulk. It's like leaning on a furnace that occasionally licks your elbow. There's a deep, ancient feeling to this kind of night. Shared warmth. Shared breath. You're not alone. You're not fighting the cold by yourself. Your companions may be hairy, opinionated, and prone to chewing things they shouldn't, but they're with you. And in the middle of winter, that's no small thing. Tomorrow, the goats will go back to their shed, Daisy will chase something imaginary, and you'll pretend not to enjoy their company so much. But tonight? You're grateful. Deeply. Quietly. Sincerely. You toss the last bone into the fire, nudge Daisy 1 inch so your hip doesn't fall asleep, and lay back. She shifts closer. You smile in the dark. Let the wind howl. You've got heartbeats. You wake up in the middle of the night, not because you're cold, but because your bladder has declared war. You try to ignore it. Really, you do. You shift. You grumble. You try breathing slower, like maybe you can outstare your kidneys. It doesn't work. So you begin the calculations. First, is it worth it? Second, can I hold it until morning without suffering permanent organ damage? Third, how far is the outhouse, exactly? And most importantly, how many layers will I have to peel off in the process? The answer is always too many. Outside, it's 20 below at best. Wind chill makes it worse. You can hear it rasping against the tent flap, testing seams, whispering threats. Inside, it's not exactly tropical, but your fire's still alive, and your animal companions are radiating body heat like lumpy little stoves. Leaving all this? That's an act of true, if unglamorous, bravery. You sit up, grunting, and begin the ritual. Gloves. Scarf. Second scarf. Coat. You wrap the blanket around your shoulders like a ceremonial cape, even though you know it'll have to come off the second you reach the door. You stomp your boots back on. Still damp. Still stiff. Still waiting to ruin your evening. You glance at the goats. They blink at you, mildly disgusted. I don't want to either, you mutter. But the body wins. You step outside. The cold hits you like a wall. Not a slap, not a breeze, the wall. It sucks the breath from your lungs, turns your nose to stone, makes your eyes water instantly. You curse gently, steam puffing from your lips like you're trying to signal a passing train. The path to the outhouse is a winding, icy insult. You shove aside snow with your boots, trying to stay upright. Your light, an old lantern, swings with each step, throwing spooky shadows that make every bush look like a bear with bad intentions. And then you see it, the outhouse. Glorious. Majestic. Built of scrap wood and hope. Leaning slightly, as if even it wants to go back inside. You open the door and are greeted with a smell you wish you hadn't remembered. The inside is dark, frozen, and vaguely hostile. The wooden seat? Cold enough to sear your soul. Now comes the speed portion of the adventure. You move like a frontier ninja, dropping layers in frantic sequence, praying your bare skin doesn't make prolonged contact with anything. Your breath curls around you like a smoke signal. The wind rattles the walls. Somewhere in the woods, something howls. You seriously consider holding it next time. Historians still argue whether outhouses were better insulated or just built faster out of sheer desperation. Some families dug them deeper, some lined the seats with fur. Others just added a second hole and called it ventilation. You've seen outhouses with rugs, shelves, even carved decorations, testaments to either ingenuity or denial. Your own? Functional. No frills. A couple of old papers tacked inside for reading, which is generous considering your current numb-fingered situation. Some folks kept a chamber pot inside the cabin. You did. Once. It froze. Mid-use. You still don't want to talk about it. Others used what they called a night bucket, which is exactly as dignified as it sounds. It sits in the corner, filled with awkward eye contact and regrets, and gets emptied in the morning with a prayer and a long stick. But if you had to choose between an indoor shame pot and trekking to the outhouse in a midnight blizzard, well, you're here, aren't you? You finish your icy ordeal with haste, redress in layers that now feel colder than when you started, and slam the outhouse door with a satisfying thud. It echoes through the trees like a swear word. The return walk is quieter. Your body is warmer, briefly. Your pride is frostbitten. You grip the lantern tighter, eye scanning for glowing eyes or shifting snow. Everything feels vaguely haunted. The cold does that, it turns everything into a ghost. Back at your tent, you peel off your outerwear like wet bark, hang things near the fire, and dive back under the furs like you're being chased. The goats barely move. Daisy thumps her tail once, then burrows deeper into your bedding. You lie back, heart slowing, breath evening, and think, not for the first time. There's got to be a better way. Tomorrow, maybe you'll start that project, the one you've been thinking about. An insulated outhouse. A padded seat. Maybe even a pipe to carry warm air from the cabin. You saw it in a sketch once. It looked like cheating, which means it's probably brilliant. Until then, the nightly routine remains: freeze, suffer, survive, forget by morning. You close your eyes. Inside your tent, warmth returns, slowly. Outside, the wind whips across the fields, looking for its next victim. Not tonight, wind. You already had your turn. It's Sunday. You know, not because there's a calendar or a bell ringing in some distant steeple, but because your body remembers. You feel it in your bones. A slower rhythm. A hunger not just for food or warmth, but for people. For gathering. For voices not your own. You layer up, again. The usual winter ensemble, wool on hope, plus your best scarf. You tuck a small bundle of dried apples in your coat pocket. It's your offering for the communal table, even though you know Martha's going to bring a pie made with mystery fruit and sorcery. She always does. Then you set out down the trail, boots crunching over fresh snow. The path winds between trees dressed in white, their branches swaying gently in a breeze that somehow manages to be both gentle and cold enough to chap your will to live. But you're not alone. Here and there, you catch glimpses of others through the trees, making their way to the same place. Figures bundled beyond recognition, waving muffled greetings, walking toward a common miracle, the church stove. The old wooden church sits at the edge of town, half buried in snow and slightly listing to one side. Its steeple leans just enough to make you nervous if you look at it too long. But inside? Inside is paradise. The door creaks open and heat hits you. Glorious. Immediate. Like walking into someone's hug. The cast iron stove in the middle of the room is roaring, stacked high with logs and faith. Around it, people crowd in like moths with mittens. You stamp the snow from your boots and take a place near the back, nodding to folks as you peel off your outermost layers. The room smells like wool, wood smoke, and, surprisingly, cinnamon. Someone's brought a bundle of clove-studded oranges. For ambiance. You're not here for sermons. You're here for warmth. And not just the temperature kind. There's old Joe, who hasn't trimmed his beard since the last harvest. He's holding a Bible upside down, but nobody corrects him because he brings the good jerky. There's Annie and Tommy in matching hats their mother knit from leftover sock yarn, each a different color. There's Clara, sitting by the stove like she owns it, which she sort of does. She chopped half the wood that feeds it, and she'll let you know. You settle into the shared silence as the preacher clears his throat. He's got a voice like butter left out overnight, soft, a little rough, but comforting. He starts reading a verse, his breath fogging in the air despite the heat. You don't catch every word. You're too focused on your toes, which are finally starting to thaw. One of them twitches back to life and you nearly weep with gratitude. Church on the frontier isn't always about God. Sometimes it's about each other. About not freezing alone. About sharing bread, soup, news, and reminders that the world extends beyond the edge of your chimney smoke. Historians still argue whether these community gatherings were spiritual glue or just thinly disguised survival meetups. You say, why not both? After the reading, there's music. A fiddle, slightly out of tune. A harmonica with one dead reed. A woman who sings so sweetly the stove seems to crackle in time with her. You hum along, off-key and happy. And then, fellowship, which is code for food. The table in the back groans under the weight of frontier generosity, lard biscuits, dried berries, beans baked until they beg for mercy, and something that might be squirrel pot pie, depending on who you ask. You hand over your apples, and Martha nods approval. High praise. You sip something hot from a shared tin cup, cider, maybe. Or rebel tea. You don't ask. It warms your hands, and that's enough. People laugh. They swap stories. They exaggerate. Someone swears they saw a moose break into their feed shed. Someone else claims her cat now sings at the moon for bacon. You add your own tale about falling into a snowdrift up to your waist and discovering what might have been an old boot or an ancient trapper. Either way, you left it alone. The kids build snow forts outside, throwing icy missiles with abandon. One gets hit in the face and just laughs, mouthful of frozen teeth and grit. Frontier kids, remember? Eventually, people start drifting back to their homes. The stove burns low. The last embers of conversation flicker like the fire itself. You help sweep the floor. Fold the benches. Thank the preacher. Pet Clara's dog, who somehow made it inside again. And when you step out into the afternoon air, it doesn't feel quite so sharp. Your coat still heavy, your boots still stiff, but your chest? Warmer. Fuller. You walk home slow, following your own footprints. You're not just surviving out here. You're belonging. And all it took was one stove, some music, and a table full of pie. It begins with a tickle at the back of your throat. At first, you blame the wood smoke. Then the cold air. Then that moment you stepped outside yesterday without your scarf properly wrapped. You knew better. But knowing better doesn't keep the fever away. By nightfall, you're coughing. And now, suddenly, survival isn't about snow or shelter or soup, it's about staying alive through something even sneakier than winter, illness. You lie in bed, piled beneath every pelt, coat, and patchwork quilt you own. Still, you shiver. Your body's staging a protest. Sweating, freezing, aching. The works. Your skull feels like it's been stuffed with damp wool and regret. You try to sip water. It tastes like tin and disappointment. You're sick. And out here, that's a whole different level of danger. Historians still argue whether more pioneers died from exposure or from disease. Either way, fever was a feared visitor. It knocked without warning and stayed as long as it pleased. Sometimes days. Sometimes forever. You cough again, sharp, dry, rattling. Daisy lifts her head from beside you, ears twitching. She sniffs your face like she's thinking, you're not supposed to smell like that. You agree. You smell like misery. You try to remember what the old doctor at the trading post said about treating camp fever. He had a voice like a rusty hinge and smelled of peppermint and tobacco. His advice, sweat it out, drink willow bark tea, and don't die. Not exactly detailed. You reach for your medicine pouch, really just a tobacco tin full of herbs, powders, and hopeful ignorance. You find spruce gum, a bit of dried yarrow, and a few pale, twisted willow twigs. Bitter, yes, but the closest thing you've got to aspirin. You chew slowly, ignoring the taste. You drink hot water. You pray to any god listening. And then you wait. The next few days blur. Your fire stays lit, barely. You remember feeding it, shaking in your blanket cocoon, jabbing sticks in blindly. Your dreams are thick, strange things, snow that walks, wolves that speak, someone yelling, boil the boots, and you yelling back, they are boiled. Daisy stays close, and that might be the only reason you don't drift too far. At some point, you knock over the water pot. It freezes solid before you can crawl to it. You curse with your last breath before collapsing back into sleep. One morning, or maybe afternoon, you open your eyes and realize the light looks different. Softer. Less cruel. The cough is still there, but lower, duller, like a bear that's finally tired of growling. You survived the worst. You're weak, yes. Your hands tremble when you lift the kettle. But your mind is clearer. Your breath less ragged. You cry, just a little, as the hot tea touches your throat. You lived. It's the frontier equivalent of winning the lottery. Once upright, you drag yourself to the supply shelf. You're down to your last onions. You cut one, steep it in boiling water, and sip the resulting onion sludge like it's the elixir of life. You add spruce tips for vitamin C, because why not? You're your own doctor now. You stagger to the door and push it open. The snow greets you with the same blank expression it always wears. But you step out, even if it's just to breathe. The cold bites less now. Your head doesn't spin. You whisper, still here, and shuffle back inside. You think of others who didn't make it through sickness. Whole families lost to winter flu, buried beneath snowdrifts without a proper goodbye. No neighbors to nurse them. No medicine. Just time and fever and silence. You think of Big Elk's people and the moss salves they make from boiling lichen and fat. You make a note to ask about that next time you're able to walk that far. Tonight, you eat broth and sleep without hallucinating that your blanket is talking. Progress. Recovery is slow. But recovery is happening. You don't just survive winter with your hands and feet. You survive it with grit. With stubbornness. With dogged, feverish determination to wake up one more day. And when you finally can stand upright again, make a real meal, and step outside with a clear head, that's when you know winter didn't win. Not this time. Spring sends a postcard before it shows up. Just a whisper in the wind at first, less bite, more breath. The snow doesn't melt, exactly. It softens. The air doesn't warm, it just stops trying to kill you quite so directly. And suddenly, your boots leave wet prints instead of frozen ones. You notice it the morning your water bucket doesn't have a lid of ice on top. You still wear 3 layers, still stoke the fire, still sleep with Daisy curled up at your knees, but you feel something new in the way the light touches the ground. Less harsh. Less hollow. You step outside and smell dirt. Actual dirt. Not pine, not smoke, not frozen silence, just honest, thawing earth. You squint at the sky. It's still grey, but you swear it's flirting with blue. You walk down to the trapline and spot the first real sign, runoff. Water slipping beneath the ice, moving beneath snowbanks like a secret trying to tell itself. You kneel and touch it. It's shockingly cold. Obviously. But it moves. And anything that moves this time of year is sacred. Up ahead, a patch of snow gives under your weight and you sink to the knee in slush. You laugh. Not because it's funny, but because it's the most action the ground's given you in months. Even the birds are testing their voices again. A chickadee chirps from a branch that's still frosted like a cake, but the sound is clear. You whistle back, and for a second, you pretend he responds. Historians still argue whether the first signs of spring were more psychological than physical. They say people started hearing the thaw before it happened, feet itching, hands loosening, eyes scanning the horizon for color. But you don't just see spring. You feel it right in your ribs. You start peeling back the window flaps on your shelter during the day, letting the sun sneak in, even if the breeze still carries teeth. You move your bedding slightly away from the fire. You step outside without your scarf and only regret it slightly. And then, one afternoon, you spot it. A sprig of green. Not much. Just a brave little blade poking up beside your woodpile, confused and premature, like a guest who arrived a week early to the party. You crouch beside it, gently push away the snow, and whisper, "You sure about this?" It says nothing, but it stays standing. You feel like doing the same. Your appetite changes. Less fat, more root vegetables. You crave fresh. You crave crunch. You start soaking those mystery beans you've been hoarding and finally cook them with the last bit of onion. It smells like hope and weird choices. The goats are louder now. Even they know. They bleat at the door before dawn, wanting to wander. You let them out. They hop onto crusted snow and immediately fall through. They stand there, confused and damp. You close the door gently and pretend you didn't see it. Daisy, of course, finds every new puddle with her feet and insists on shaking them off inside the cabin. Repeatedly. You tell her she's banned. She ignores you. Spring means mud. Mud means Daisy owns everything now. You notice something else: the sun stays longer. You still have hours of chill, but they end differently. The light lingers, casting long shadows across your camp. You sit outside one evening, wrapped in a coat, cup of tea in hand, and just watch. Nothing moves. Nothing blooms. But everything feels possible again. You remember your neighbors, scattered up and down the valley. You wonder if they're seeing the same signs. If they're stepping out of their cabins, stretching for the first time in weeks, blinking into the light like moles with winter hangovers. There's an energy to it. A tension. Like the earth is holding its breath before the big reveal. You start making lists, dig out the storage pit, check for spoilage, build a new hatch for the hen coop once you have hens again. You sharpen your tools. You oil the boots that barely survived. You take inventory, not just of supplies, but of yourself. You lived through it. The long freeze. The whiteouts. The sickness. The silences. You made it. Your beard is longer. Your knuckles are rough. There's a tear in your coat that tells a story you don't really want to retell. But you're standing. You're looking at a drip from the eaves and thinking, that's a nice sound. You still have weeks of cold ahead. Maybe more snow. A false spring is always possible, those cruel, sunny days followed by a blizzard that feels personal. But the shift has started. You feel it in your bones, in your breath, in the way Daisy now sleeps a little further from the fire. You're already planning your first trip to town, already craving news, already wondering if that girl who works the grain counter still remembers your name. You grin, just a little. Spring may take its time. But you? You're ready. Your axe swings easier now. Not because the wood is softer, far from it, but because your arms remember the rhythm. Chop, shift, lift, split. It's almost meditative. The blade bites clean, the log size apart, and your boots crunch against thawed ground where snow once reigned like a bored tyrant. Spring isn't loud out here. It doesn't burst in with flowers and warm breezes and picnics. It tiptoes. It tests. One day of sun, then two of sleet. A burst of birdsong, followed by a night so cold your lantern oil thickens again. But still, progress. And with progress comes cleanup. Winter's debris has a way of stacking up, twigs in the stovepipe, soot on every surface, firewood chips in your bedroll. The inside of your shelter smells like damp wool, smoked meat, and mild desperation. You throw open the door, prop it with a rock, and begin what frontier folks affectionately called the great unburdening. You haul out everything: furs, crates, pots, pelts. You hang what you can. Beat the rest. Turn over the bedding like flipping a page in a long, dark chapter. The wind helps. It always does. Even when it's still cold, it has a freshness to it now, less like a slap, more like a nudge. You find old things as you clean. A glove you thought you lost. A spoon chewed by Daisy. A button from a coat you haven't worn since January. You collect them like artifacts, reminders of the weeks you survived, half asleep and fully frozen. Outside, you build a new stack of firewood. Not because you need it immediately, but because you will. Next winter starts preparing for itself the second this one ends. You trim kindling, sort your matches, check the grease on the sled runners. Everything is spring cleaned, but with one eye on the future. That's the frontier way. Even in the thaw, you plan for the freeze. Historians still argue whether spring was a time of celebration or just a quieter form of work. There's no answer. It's both. You're grateful. You're exhausted. You're never quite warm. But you've made it to the season of maintenance. You mend what tore. Patch what cracked. Sharpen what dulled. Your coat gets new stitches along the collar. Your boots, bless them, get one last oiling before the leather finally admits defeat. You stitch a patch onto your sleeping bag from an old flour sack. It doesn't match. It's perfect. Your body is waking up, too. You stretch in the mornings now, joints creaking like cabin doors. Your appetite shifts. You crave movement, daylight, noise. You go looking for the trail again. You visit the river, which is no longer whispering beneath ice, but laughing above it. Fast, cold, clear. The animals stir, too. The goats are bold again, nibbling at anything greenish. A squirrel returns to the tree stump it calls a palace. Even the bears are rumored to be rolling over in their dens. You make a mental note to check your bear whistle. Not that it ever worked, it just gave you something to blame when it didn't. Daisy trots ahead of you on the trail, tail high, nose in everything. She's a blur of energy now, shaking off the last shadows of winter sleep. She finds tracks, fresh ones. Deer. Maybe elk. She gives you a look like, should we follow? You give her a look like, absolutely not. She runs anyway. You spend the afternoon fixing the chicken coop. You don't have chickens, but you plan to. Someday. That's spring's gift, plans. You see the land again, not just as something that must be endured, but something that can be shaped. A new garden patch here. A fresh snare line there. Maybe even a small smokehouse, if you can find the right wood. You walk to the old fence and dig out the corner post that snapped under snow way back in February. It was buried for weeks. Now you lift it free, brush off the mud, and start hammering it back into place. You mutter to it, told you we weren't done yet. That night, you sit outside by a low fire. Not because you need it. Because you want it. You sip from a tin mug, the contents warm and vaguely herbal. You think it might be leftover onion tea mixed with pine needles and stubbornness. You pretend it tastes good. The moon rises fat and low. The wind is calmer. The land doesn't groan anymore, it breathes. You listen. You're not just surviving now. You're restoring. Rebuilding what was broken. Reclaiming pieces of yourself scattered across the ice and snow. You look at your hands, calloused and cracked, and realize they no longer just defend against the cold. They build. They make. The worst is over. The work has just begun. The trail is open again. Snow still rims the path in dirty, stubborn heaps, but the mud has started to dry in patches, revealing packed earth beneath. You sling your pack over your shoulder, not as heavy this time, and set out, boots squelching a little less with each step. You're headed to the valley. Not for trade. Not for medicine. Just to see people. You haven't heard a voice not your own in weeks. And though you've had plenty of conversations, with Daisy, with the wind, with a particularly judgmental goat, none of them have replied in complete sentences. It's time. As you walk, you notice how the landscape has changed. Trees that spent the last few months hunched under blankets of snow now stretch upward, their branches skeletal but defiant. Tiny green buds peek from twigs like promises. The stream beside the trail has broken its silence, babbling with thaw and momentum. Even the birds seem chatty, hopping from limb to limb, singing about absolutely nothing with total confidence. At one point, you pass the spot where you nearly lost your snowshoe in a drift. You pause, nod to it. Survivor's courtesy. You remember when just stepping outside took planning. When frost coated everything, including your thoughts. Now you hike without freezing. Without fear. Your steps aren't just functional, they're intentional. The air smells of last year's leaves, wet earth, and sap. And something new. Hope. You crest the last hill before the valley and see it spread out below. Cabins, fences, trails, smoke curling from chimneys. The community is waking up again. A woman leads a donkey through slush. Two kids chase a wheel down a slope. Someone's hammering wood, rhythm steady and bold. You breathe deep. You're not here to ask for anything. You're here to return. They see you before you call out. A few hands wave. Someone points. One of the kids yells your name and sprints up the trail, only to fall face first into a soggy patch of ground. You laugh, and the sound feels strange, like an old tool finally oiled. The neighbors gather slowly, spilling from cabins like they weren't just hibernating for half the year. There's talk of repairs, of planting, of that coyote that got too bold. There's stew warming on one fire, bannock on another. Someone offers you a tin mug before you even take off your coat. You're home. Historians still argue whether frontier survival was about the individual or the group. Whether grit or generosity built communities. But right now, you know the truth, it's both. You sit near the fire and listen. No one asks what your winter was like. They don't need to. Everyone here bears the same creases, the same stories behind the eyes. They nod. They pour. They pass you a plate. Someone strikes up a tune on a fiddle. It's a little flat. No one cares. You hum along. Daisy naps under your bench like she never once had to keep you from freezing to death. One of the kids uses her as a pillow. Laughter returns. So does music. So does noise, glorious noise, full of life and interruption and the kind of joy you can only earn through silence. You eat. You warm your hands. You tell the story about the midnight outhouse trip again, back by demand. You learn who had a baby. Who lost a shed roof. who burned their sourdough starter trying to make pancakes on a fire too hot. You say you're staying the night, and they say, of course. You're part of the rhythm again. And as evening settles over the valley, with golden light catching in puddles and pale clouds drifting lazy above the pines, you understand what you've truly survived. Not just winter. Not just snow, wind, and frostbite. You've survived solitude. You've held your soul together through darkness and cold, and carried it, beaten, scratched, but intact, back into the warmth of other hearts. That's the final act of frontier winter. Not the thawing of snow, but the rejoining. Tomorrow you'll head back to your camp, to patch fences and sharpen blades and build new things with warmer hands. But tonight? Tonight, you're just a human by a fire. And that's enough. Now, you breathe slower. The fire burns low. The sky is deepening into that bruised velvet blue that only comes at the very edge of sleep. Voices fade. The last bowl is scraped clean. The kids are long since tucked in. Even Daisy snores. And you just sit. The chair beneath you creaks slightly, old wood shifting under stillness. Your cup is empty now, but your hands remember the warmth. The air smells of pine ash, wool, and faint tobacco. A pot rattles once in the distance, then settles. You let your eyes drift shut, just for a moment. And what you see is not snow, or frost, or storms. It's branches with tiny buds. It's a river flowing free again. It's your own hands mending a coat with careful stitches, slow and steady. The cold didn't disappear. It simply passed through you, reshaped you, carved out spaces for new things to grow. And now those spaces are starting to fill. With laughter. With soup. With song. And with sleep. You made it through. So rest now. You've earned it, fully, gently, without question. Lay back. Let your breath grow deep and even. The storm is over. The fire is warm. And tomorrow is coming, bright, green, and new. SHHHH. You're safe now.